myself, Dr. Sandeep Tripathi. Today, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcoming you all this evening. On behalf of the Forum for Global Studies, I would like to extend my heart welcome to Dr. Petr Topychkanov, who has accepted our invitation to speak on the given topic, navigating the changing contours in Indo-Russia relations, a partnership beyond the defense realm. Dr. Petr is working as a senior researcher at Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Sweden, as well as he has been associated as a former fellow at Russian Carnegie Moscow, Russia. Dr. Petr is an expert in Russian International Affairs Council, Moscow. So I'm very happy that Dr. Petr's expert on the Indo-Pacific and Indo-Russia relations will be very, very insightful for all of us. So I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Petr Topychkanov, that you accepted our invitation. So thank you so much for being us at today's program. Now, I would like to extend my heart welcome to today's moderator, Don McLean-Gill. Don McLean-Gill is a research director at Forum for Global Studies, New Delhi, as well as he is also a fellow at the National Development and Security Council, Philippines. Now, today we have with us Mr. Dibyanshu Jindal. Dibyanshu Jindal is an honorary fellow at Forum for Global Studies, New Delhi, as well as he is also candidate at Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal Global Universities. So I'm really grateful to all of you to be here as a moderator, Don McLean-Gill, as our guest, as a Dr. Petr Topychkanov, and of course Dibyanshu Jindal. So I'm sure that this program is going to be very, very delightful for all of us. Now I would like to invite today's moderator, Don McLean-Gill, to take the floor and proceed the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandeep. And again, I wish to welcome you, Dr. Topychkanov, for accepting our humble invitation to take part in this very important discussion. To that, we are truly honored, sir. Now, if we may begin with the crux of our discussion. Now, the Indo-Russian relations, or the relations between India and Russia, have been seen to be one of the most significant cornerstones in the international system today. It is considered to be historic, traditional, robust. These are a few of the many positive adjectives that are being used to describe this bilateral relationship. However, due to the shifts in the global balance of power, and of course the changes in the geopolitical landscape, it would be important to examine particular points within and around the bilateral relationship. So if I may begin our first discussion point, sir, is that from the new Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation in 1993 to achieving the status of a special and privileged strategic partnership, Indo-Russian relations have been seen to be at a significantly positive growth. Now, how would you map the current state of Indo-Russian relations, sir?
Thank you so much, Mr. Don McLean-Gill. And also, before answering the question, I would like to thank Dr. Sandeep Tripathi for the kind introduction, and also greetings to Dibyanshu Jindal. So it's my pleasure to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much. Such conversations, they fill the gap of the absence of actual travels and meetings and discussions. And so that is why thank you for this opportunity. And if to answer to your question in brief, I would say that from 1993 till now, the relations between Russia and India developed significantly, especially in the areas where the governments play the main role. It's about defense sector, it's about nuclear peaceful cooperation, it's about energy, it's about huge companies' involvement, including oil company Rosneft from Russia. So in this area, the progress is obvious for everybody who observe the relations between our countries. And in some areas, it's fully civilian cooperation. In some areas, it's related to military cooperation, with Russia remaining the key source of military equipment and technologies, especially strategic significant technologies needed to India for developing such systems as nuclear submarines and also aircraft and missile technologies and so on. At the same time, Russia and India survived different periods of time after 1993 and preserved friendship and trust between each other. Despite several crises, despite several misunderstandings existed between Delhi and Moscow. For instance, in India, it wasn't understood the Russian arguments behind closer ties, including military cooperation between Russia and Pakistan. But nevertheless, Russia and India kept talking, sometimes behind the closed doors, about these relations, and preserved the trust on the political level. So what we have less developed this time between Russia and India: people-to-people contacts, educational cooperation. Just if to compare the number of students from India, for instance, in Russia and Germany, or in Russia and many other countries in the world, including the United States, including Australia and so on. Unfortunately, this number in Russia is extremely small. And if to try to find Russian students in India, unfortunately, this number will be less, even less present, unfortunately. And it's if to try to understand what kind of students Russia and India exchange with each other, it's more about technical specialists, it's about medical specialists, future medical specialists, but it's just absence of people dealing with social science, political science, with economical science, and so on. Normally, students from India prefer other countries to get this knowledge. And also, and this is a big problem for our economic relations, small companies, small business is underrepresented in the relations between Russia and India. Partially it's about just about the state policy, partially it's about just it's difficult having this bureaucracy obstacles on both sides just to develop this contact between small business companies with the absence of actual common border between us. And partially it depends on the absence of effective transport corridor between Russia and India. And we will be able to discuss this a little bit later today. So many reasons, and I do remember, for me, it's the biggest symbol of the differences in the economic field between Russia and India is the picture, or many pictures, from business people meetings during Russian-Indian summits. If you check the names representing India, it will be people from independent private companies, huge companies, technological companies, but private. If you check the names from the Russian side, you will find people from state companies. But state companies and the logic that people, top management of state companies, the logic they have in their minds about how to develop business is very different from those who developed their businesses in the private area without over presence of government. So this, I try to cover a number of issues. So the bottom line is strategic partnership is here. Strategic partnership remains to be unique if to compare with the partnerships of India with other countries. At the same time, we kept a number of gaps in this strategic partnership that should be addressed urgently, because if we address them, it will help India and Russia to boost their partnership further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Topychkanov, for actually wonderfully mapping and critically mapping Indo-Russian relations and, of course, the way forward in this initial discussion. We're talking about in the political sphere, in the economic sphere, and, of course, the social sphere in terms of people-to-people contact as well. Now, these factors significantly, as you've mentioned, contribute and will contribute to the enhancement of the bilateral relationship between the two countries. Now that we have a general and, of course, a good framework in understanding the dynamic and unique relationship between the two countries, I guess it would be worthwhile to discuss the effects of current geopolitical trends on this particular strategic partnership. Now, the situation in Afghanistan has greatly affected the geopolitical landscape of the continent. Moreover, as different powers are faced with varied interests in engaging with the evolving situation, how does this affect the bilateral partnership between Russia and India? Could there be a concrete platform for cooperation on this particular issue, sir?
Sure. Russia and India have several platforms to deal with the problem in Afghanistan. Of course, the most logical level of our cooperation is the bilateral level. And here, for me, both countries have the biggest problem. Because before the current crisis in Afghanistan, there were some problems in common understanding what is better for Afghanistan and for the regional security. It's a well-known fact that India invested a lot into the human capital development in Afghanistan, into civilian objects, into the economy of Afghanistan before the current crisis. And of course, from this point of view, India had high stakes in Afghanistan. At the same time, Russia didn't invest into the same areas in Afghanistan during the NATO and the United States military presence in this country. And at the same time, Russia developed a dialogue with China and Pakistan and the United States, including the representatives of the Taliban movement, still titled by many countries as a terrorist movement, including by India itself. And here, this policy of Russia didn't find full understanding in India. And the bilateral dialogue, I suppose, between Russia and India didn't help to resolve this issue. Instead of meeting positions of two countries, India tried to understand and demonstrated some flexibility, including by sending its representative to a conference on Afghanistan with representatives of the Taliban movement in Moscow. And Russia kept trying arranging such things without actually synchronizing its policy with the Indian approach. And it didn't help us to find a common ground. And it's not the best starting point now for developing Indo-Russian conversation on Afghanistan and Taliban. But despite this problem, we have to deal with that together. We have to have this conversation bilaterally because it's a common security concern. And it's common security concern that these two countries, of course, may discuss with many other players, including with China, with Pakistan, with the United States, Central Asian republics for sure, and Iran, but also they should discuss this together. And there is also a multilateral platform, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I would like to recall that the establishment of this organization was actually a response to the crisis in Afghanistan. And the first task agreed between the members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, even before India and Pakistan joined this organization, it was to deal with the problem of Afghanistan. So from this point of view, it's the most logical thing where these countries might have this conversation together. And the good thing is that they have the same table as China, Central Asian republics, Pakistan, Russia, India. They have several tools to use in response to the crisis in Afghanistan, including anti-terrorist cooperation, where both India and Pakistan are present. So from this point of view, it's a very useful instrument, the most logical instrument, I suppose, on the multilateral level between Russia and India. Another question: what we can do? And it's a long conversation. I don't think that now together we are ready to find a good solution. If to be short, there is a conflict between two approaches. The first approach is a waiting game, just to wait what will be in Afghanistan. And if the new authorities in Afghanistan are able to stop terrorism, to stop drugs trafficking, humanitarian crisis, and so on, so then it will be a good reason to accept these authorities as a legitimate power in Afghanistan. But in the same time, another approach is about this. The urgent thing is that the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is developing right now. And right now, there are terrorist attacks and terrorist policy by the new authorities in Afghanistan against the religious minorities, against those who are not agree with them, with those who supported the previous regime in Kabul. It doesn't matter what do we think about the previous regime in Kabul, how responsible it was or how effective it was. The thing is that humanitarian crisis, including violations of basic human rights and rights of women, girls in Afghanistan, is right now. And if we have a waiting game approach dominating in state policies around the world, it doesn't help to prevent worsening humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. And here, of course, Russia and India and other countries, first of all, neighboring countries, they should have proactive policy right now, just to understand how to respond to this crisis and how to prevent it from being worse and worse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for providing that detailed analysis regarding the complexity, of course, of the situation in Afghanistan. Both India and Russia put at their centermost policy towards the stability, of course, of the region, and of course, the welfare of the individuals in Afghanistan, the Afghans' welfare. These are all at the heart of the discussions between the two countries. You have mentioned, sir, there have been bilateral and, of course, multilateral channels to which, in order to address this particular issue. However, there are some impediments, of course, in terms of the complexity of the overall situation in Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over in terms of leadership and, of course, administration. Now, this, of course, leads to other areas of concern towards South Asia that may spill over to other regions as well. Both India and Russia, as you've mentioned, are well aware of these complexities and, of course, these challenges. And as you've rightfully mentioned, sir, a proactive approach is absolutely necessary. There have been channels of communication that have been established recently between India and Russia to discuss this particular issue. And that, I believe, is also a step forward in order to mitigate the situation, at least for the short term and hopefully in the mid and long term as well. Now, going beyond Afghanistan, of course, the situation in South Asia, the Indo-Pacific concept, of course, has been gaining a lot of traction in terms of geopolitical security discourses. Now, the concept has often been an area for discussion and debate among policymakers in different parts of the globe. However, India finds itself to be a major player in this construct and has in fact invited Russia to collaborate and take part in its vision of an inclusive Indo-Pacific. Now, sir, would you feel that both countries can eventually collaborate against the backdrop of an inclusive Indo-Pacific framework as espoused by India in the long term?
Thank you so much for this question. It's a very complicated question. Of course, you don't have easy questions for the today conversation. Why it's very complicated? Because in Russia, there is some concern about this concept because in Russia, the main emphasis when discussing this concept is on the US version of the Asia-Pacific framework. Of course, we here in this room, we understand that India has its own vision. It's not dependent on the US Asia-Pacific strategy. And for India, it's a long-term vision of the security and economic and political relations in the area of Indian Ocean and beyond. However, in Russia, many people ignore this vision by India, and they pay the bigger attention to the US version. And in the US version, their attention is focused on military shift of power and to the Asia-Pacific, as it was associated with the Barack Obama administration decisions. And also with the frameworks like, for instance, the Quad, including Australia and India and Japan and the United States, and the most recent initiative between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So for Russian thinkers and observers, all these developments are directed against another Russian strategic partner, China, and also these developments potentially affect the Russian security in Far East, which is also the area where Russia exists. So from this point of view, there is a huge concern about this title of this concept of Asia Pacific and all the developments in the military intelligence and security cooperation in this area. So my strong belief is that to have two positions by Russia and India closer, first of all, they need to have a comprehensive dialogue on this. And second, they need to understand what they do want to develop under the auspices of the Asia Pacific concept. One of the points is that Russia and India have joint security concerns. The basic thing, it's about the piracy. It's about illegal use of international waters by criminal terrorist organizations. And here, of course, Russia and India, they already demonstrated their will to cooperate, including in the framework of naval exercises between Russia and India, but also in the framework of the dialogues that Russia and India had covering maritime security. So it's about counter-piracy, counter-terrorism cooperation, but it's also about using this region to develop transport corridors. And again, this is the question that I mentioned before about the lack of stable transport corridors between Russia and India. Previously, India invested a lot into building a transport corridor from India to Iran, its port Chabahar, and from Iran to Afghanistan, because the dream and the strategic vision of India was to build this route to Afghanistan and Central Asia and then to Russia. Unfortunately, this dream is paused. I wouldn't say that it's totally cancelled, but at least paused due to the well-known events in Afghanistan. So it's a good reason to be back to the idea how to develop, how to re-establish the north-south corridor between Russia and India using the Indian Ocean, Iran, Caspian Sea, and Russia and Central Asia. How to develop this? So it's just one of the many aspects that Russia and India can discuss under the framework of Asia Pacific. By the way, another area, it's also it's a huge an opportunity for us, but also it's a good reason for Russian and Indian concerns. It's about cybersecurity. It's about cybersecurity in this region, because cyber threats sometimes, and quite often, to be honest, they can affect trade routes, including international waters. So from this point of view, it's also the good reason for Russia and India to discuss these issues together. So I named just a few lines, but the discussion should be much bigger. So I hope that Indian partners will help Russian observers and practitioners to overcome the Russian traditional concern about the name Asia Pacific. And we will be able to have this very pragmatic and precise conversation about the concrete interest and project in this region. Thank you so much. Sorry, just one small, not small, but big thing, but I need to mention that For Russia, in years, there was a strong belief in another concept, Eurasia. It's a land space from China to Europe, from north, and with a new northern corridor. Because of the climate change, it's more accessible to use it, to the south, to India. And when discussing the Asia-Pacific concept, it's a very important aspect to find connectivities between the Eurasian concept as a trade and economic space and the Asia-Pacific as an economic space and trade routes. So how they connect to each other, how to develop this connectivity between them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Topychkanov. And of course, you have fantastically mentioned, of course, the areas of convergence between India and Russia are definitely known. There are a lot of areas of convergence in the security realm, of course, in the economic and trade realm. However, there are, of course, sensitivities in terms of some of the concepts being applied in this particular geographic space. As you've mentioned, there is no monopoly of the concept. We have the Eurasian concept, as you have also mentioned. We have several other concepts which have emerged throughout history as well. And as you have rightfully said, sir, India's perception of the Indo-Pacific definitely banks on the amount of inclusivity within that geographical realm, because India is aware of the significance, of course, of its partnership with Russia and would not want to compromise this as well. So this particular balance, of course, becomes a little complicated with other actors being involved in the overall discussion, and of course, which adds to the further of the complexity of this particular discussion. As you've mentioned, sir, this is no small topic. This is definitely a topic for the ages that needs to be discussed. However, definitely more communication between the Indian side and the Russian side would be important in order to iron out folds in terms of the conceptual understanding of how to cooperate. And this, I believe, as you've mentioned, I definitely agree, is very important to sustain the bilateral relationship and the overall development of the region. Now, sir, we have discussed two important geopolitical concepts and, of course, discussions that are happening throughout the world. Well, let's dig in deeper into the areas, as you have mentioned, between India and Russia. Now, the areas of partnership. Now, India and Russia relations have often been described, as I've mentioned earlier, as historic and robust. However, the partnership has greatly revolved around the realm of defense. Although recently there has been a push to solidify the economic engagements in the Russian Far East. In fact, there has been a lot of talk about a potential trilateral with Japan as well. Do you believe that this endeavor can be significantly maximized and sustained? And moreover, sir, you could probably add into other particular potential areas that need to be explored. I know you've mentioned a few, but perhaps we could take that into consideration as well, sir.
Yes, I agree with you that Far East of Russia can be and should be a good opportunity for Russia and India to develop business cooperation, economic cooperation with each other. So it's true, but at the same time, the question is about the concrete areas of cooperation. So, and this is a big question, where and how we can develop our partnership. So you mentioned at the beginning of this question about defense and partnership, defense ties between Russia and India. And I would say that it dominates relations of the countries, but at the same time, it may provide a good opportunity for technological peaceful cooperation. Because now, if we deal with defense contracts, they involve a lot of institutes and companies developing software, developing different applications for these concrete defense contracts, but also for other peaceful solutions. And one of the biggest things that India decided, not recently now, but still recently, if to compare with a long history, that India allowed private companies to be part of military and defense procurement processes inside India. So, and it helped Russia and India to establish new contacts, and I hope that it will be developed. I mean, the bigger and bigger role of private companies from India in the relations between two countries, to start with defense contracts, but it will go beyond these defense contracts, I believe. So what it means? It means that where we can, and the most logical result of the established experience between our countries is to develop technological cooperation between Russia and India in the technological areas, including software, including technological solutions. So it's fine, and I would say that probably it's the best way to focus on that, and not only on big companies but small companies, giving the flexibility of small companies with software. It's a great opportunity. The question is, and this is the big question for now, Russia is under economic sanctions from the United States, and this is the biggest problem for India, but also from other countries as well, due to the events of 2014 and the Crimean annexation. Due to these sanctions, a lot of other countries, they have just organizational problems to develop business with Russia. There are different solutions, but it's always a big problem, for instance, for a company, for having a business in the West, to develop its ties with Russian big and small companies, or just to develop relations with Russia. And here we need to think about innovative approaches. And of course, that is why the state involvement is important, because it can help to find these innovative solutions, how to support this business-to-business contacts. And it would be good if governments will think not only about big companies, big names, but also about small entities, how to support them, how to let them to transfer budgets, money, and people under small projects without being targeted by the countries that sanctioned Russia after 2014. So, and of course, it's not only about sanctions sets related to 2014, because after that there were a number of other sets. So this is a very important thing that our side should discuss. So that is why I would say that probably it shouldn't be just focused on the Far East region of Russia. So it should be bigger, and it should be a comprehensive conversation. But probably, and this is probably just my humble suggestion, probably the best thing is to develop the experience that Russia and India already gained under the defense cooperation, and to develop this into high technological cooperation in the peaceful areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful discussion, of course, on the areas, of course, of opportunities between the two countries, and other areas which need to be discovered and, of course, explored as well. You've rightfully mentioned, of course, the need to not only focus on large companies, but focus on the individual and small and medium enterprises as well to facilitate grassroots engagement between the two countries. And in order to, of course, facilitate other areas and other approaches to overcome certain hurdles, which you have also mentioned, sir. And that, I believe, would be a definite way forward between the two countries, of course, not only in the defense realm or the military realm, which has facilitated a great deal of the bilateral partnership, as you've mentioned, through the technological transfers that have been taking place. And this could definitely serve as a stepping stone for more engagements in the future. Rightfully said, sir. Now, if I may burn it down to the last question, sir, I would like to ask your opinion, of course, on what would you believe to be the way forward between both countries in terms of enhancing and maximizing their bilateral partnership, given the ever dynamic shifts in the global geopolitical landscape?
I think that this question about how to develop the future of the partnership of Russia and India, it's a big question. And let's compare these relations with the building. The building was built, and the building is strong, and so it has some problems, and of course it has some problems bigger and bigger if they are ignored longer. So the question is how to prevent these small issues from being bigger and more affecting for the bilateral relations. So my strong belief that Russia and India shouldn't take their bilateral relations as a given realm. So they need to have a permanent reassessment of their relations. So it should be taken not behind the closed doors. It should be taken publicly and with involvement of larger actors. Not only the people from the top from both countries, not only bureaucracies of two countries, not only big businesses, but it should be about more people, not always pleasant towards each other, but it should be a fair conversation with journalists, with academia, with the public, with small businesses, with those who can provide a fair picture of the relations between our countries. So it should be a permanent exercise every year between our countries. It will help us to assess what the problems we have, what kind of solutions we can find. We don't have this instrument, such an instrument right now. We have a state-sponsored level. We have military to military track, but we don't have a general and related to the public opinions dialogue between our countries. We need to establish it just to assess the status of this building, what the gaps this building does have. The second question is about that having these problems, we need to have a good instrument to deal with them, because now we have commissions, we have meetings on the top level and between businesses and so on. But if we have permanent instruments that people can call to each other, they can discuss this just now. It happened before. For instance, I can give you a good example that when there was a problem related to the Vikramaditya aircraft carrier with a lot of delays and so on, the Indian side was able to call to the top leadership of Russia just to deliver its concern. And it helped several times to speed up the process, to avoid other problems into this cooperation. Now it seems to me that it doesn't work anymore. Also, and this is also an important thing, unfortunately, there is a lack of joint understanding and even knowledge about each other. So it's, of course, you would say that it's about PR, public relations policy. I would say that it's a bigger thing. It's about letting the Indian audience to know Russia not from the Western newspapers and TV channels, but just from Russia. It's not about presenting the Russian propaganda into India, but it's about letting Indians to read and to know Russia and to decide what they want to agree with about Russian policies and what they don't like. So the same is about Russia. The same situation exists in Russia. Unfortunately, the public, the general public, it doesn't know, it doesn't understand properly India. And I demonstrated this problem by example of Asia Pacific. Because in Russia, it's still misunderstood and interpreted as a concept developed by the United States, but not India. So this is a good example where we should work hard just to make two countries closer to each other. It's just few things, big, but few things. And I believe that if we have such conversations like we have today, we will be able to produce a longer menu of issues and problems that can be addressed and resolved bilaterally. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Topychkanov, for providing this, of course, very insightful and important points in order to highlight, of course, the areas where India and Russia can work on in order to enhance their bilateral relationship, and not only from the top-down approach, but also from the grassroots level, the individual level, people-to-people connection to enhance awareness from both sides is definitely important to spearhead growth in the bilateral partnership. And you have rightfully mentioned, sir, the need to go beyond existing frameworks and in order to enhance areas of consultation between other sectors as well, such as the academia, such as other sectors, of course, that you have rightfully mentioned. And on that note, sir, you have wonderfully and concisely and comprehensively discussed this particular issue with us. And this is definitely a mind opener for many areas as well, and could be a stepping stone for more engagements to come in the future. And with that, Dr. Topychkanov, we truly thank you on behalf of FGS for giving your time and, of course, taking your time out to discuss with us this important topic. And on this note, sir, I wish to hand the floor over to Mr. Divyanshu Jindal for the vote of thanks, of course.
Thanks, Tom. I would like to start by thanking Professor Topychkanov. It was a very holistic view that he has provided us. He has touched a lot of points ranging from people-to-people contacts and the need for a pragmatic approach to India-Russia relations. So I think our audience will be immensely, they will immensely benefit from the ideas and the holistic perspective that Professor Petr Topychkanov has shared. I would like to thank our president, Dr. Sandeep Tripathi, without whom this event might not have been possible, and Mr. Don McLean-Gill, who has moderated this event. Most importantly, I would like to thank Professor Topychkanov, and last but not the least, I would like to thank all our listeners and our audience whose inputs are immensely valuable to us and will keep us going in holding similar events in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf again of FGS, hoping for more engagements in the future as well.